Arguably the most recognized place in the West is Monument Valley. This magnificent area was largely unknown outside the Navajo Nation until the 1930s, when Harry Goulding, the owner of the only hotel around, sent photos of the landscape near his hotel to Hollywood director John Ford. The images intrigued Ford. He ended up shooting several westerns here, and soon to people around the world, this defined the American West. Later, parts of the Back to the Future movies were shot here. Later still, this is where Forrest Gump stopped running across the country. It sits on semi-autonomous land under Navajo Nation jurisdiction, so Monument Valley is a Navajo Nation tribal park. It straddles the Arizona-Utah border in the Four Corners region. The park road turnoff is in Utah, but it quickly heads south into Arizona. You'll spend many hours on the road just to get here. The nearest major airport is in Phoenix, over 300 miles away. Perhaps because it is so remote, few Americans come here. Almost all of the visitors are from Europe or the Far East. A surprising number get here on Harleys. It's pretty easy to take a photo worth hanging on your wall here. At the end of this video, I'll show you where some of the best photo opportunities are. While this view from the parking lot is really good, there's a better way to see this American icon. If your vehicle is up to it, you can drive through the valley for free. A 17-mile dirt road winds its way through the valley. Many of the overseas visitors get here on a tour bus that's too large for the road. So there is another option. For $40 to $75 each, you can take a guided tour in an open vehicle. Well, it's almost always hot and dusty on the approximately 2-hour tour, so your own vehicle is likely to be the more comfortable choice. It's plenty wide and safe enough for most vehicles. Only large RVs and cars with very low ground clearance are not recommended. The view outside the windscreen is always great, but the visitor's guide lists 11 viewpoints that are really special. The first is a view of the Mittens from a slightly lower vantage point. They look a bit like hands, and hence the name, but they signify spiritual beings. The road continues to drop to the valley floor. The speed limit is 15 miles an hour, so there's plenty of time to see the sights. The next viewpoint is Elephant Butte. It's the large feature just ahead. They say with the right lighting, there's a resemblance to an elephant facing west. Like most of the landmarks in the valley, it does not have a Navajo name. Most were named by early settlers. Some were named by General Custer's men. Yes, that General Custer. He and his men forcibly marched 9,000 Navajos through this area on the way to Fort Sumner in 1864. It's quite easy to identify the next view. Those 3 spires in the distance are the 3 sisters. They represent a Catholic nun facing her 2 pupils. The road gets a bit sandy as it heads to one of the best-known views in the valley. It was named after the man who made it famous, director John Ford. This view has been seen in many Western movies, including the 1956 classic The Searchers with John Wayne. In one scene, you can see this spot before the road was built. There's a large parking area here, and locals are allowed to sell their handiwork in small shacks and on tables. For a couple of dollars, a man on a horse will even pose for you, so you can get that perfect shot. Viewpoint number 5, Camel Butte, is the mesa on the right. After John Ford's Point, the trail is a narrow one-way track that is pretty flat. View number 6 is Rain God Mesa. It's on the left. It marks the geological center of the park. It's named for the rain god, who stored water for the people on the south side of the mesa. 7 is Sandy Springs Aquifers. I didn't see a spring, but there's plenty of sand in front of view number 8, the Totem Pole. Just to the left of the totem pole is one of the few features with a Navajo name. I can't pronounce it, but it's something like Yi-Bi-Chi. The totem pole is one of the most photographed locations in the tribal park. To get up close, you'll have to hire a guide with a 4x4. From here, the road starts its return leg. It's a bit narrow and sandy. The winding path goes through some quite interesting scenery, including this balanced rock. After a slight incline, there's a large parking area. for Artist Point, which is viewpoint number 9. As the light changes throughout the day, the scene also changes here, and some hang out here all day. There are only 2 viewpoints left. The window can be seen from the road, but there's a better view of the mitten between the 2 buttes at the end of a short walking trail. The last viewpoint is called the Thumb. Shortly after the Thumb, the path joins the main 2-way road back to the parking lot. Though you've been on this section before, you'll be amazed at how different it looks heading in the opposite direction. So, take your time. On average, it takes 1.5 to 2.5 hours to complete the 17-mile loop. The average visitor stays only for a few hours, but to really see the place, you'll have to stay for at least a couple of days. Up until a few years ago, there was nothing on site but a small diner. Goulding's was the only hotel within 20 miles, and jobs for the locals were hard to come by. But in 2008, the Navajo opened the View Hotel. It has nice rooms for about $220 a night. There's also a new restaurant, gift shop, and small museum. There's a primitive campground on site for around $10 each. Water is not available, and the only restrooms are near the hotel. Goulding's is 4 miles down the road. Rooms there are around $200 to $250 a night. There are many moderately priced hotels 20 plus miles to the south in the town of Kayenta, Arizona. If you stay there, believe it or not, you need to go into the Burger King to see a museum-quality display describing the role of the Navajo Windtalkers in World War II. There are also a couple of nice hotels and lodges about 23 miles north of the valley in the Utah town of Mexican Hat. There's also an inexpensive motel where for $35, $38 if you're paying by credit card, you'll get a room with no air conditioning. It did have a shower and power to plug battery chargers into though. On our visit, it was full of partying Germans who were smoking and laughing into the wee hours. This caused us to wake up late and just miss the sun rising behind the mittens. But that didn't really matter, because while shooting the time-lapse video, a man asked me to show him how to use his camera. Immediately after I did, he walked right into my shot, proving once again that no good deed goes unpunished. Now here are a few hints on how to photograph this place. I've been here several times, dating back to 1996, and I've been lucky enough to take several good images over the years. But good light makes it much easier. On one trip, I got nothing. It was in March. They say that's a good time to come, but for me, well, the sky was overcast for several days. I've had much better luck in May, June, and in the fall. Let's start outside the park boundary. This classic shot of the road with Sentinel Mesa in the background is taken north of the park entrance on Highway 163 near mile marker 13. At one of the smaller turnouts on the northwest side of the road, there's even a small sign designating the spot where the fictional Forrest Gump quit his cross-country run. The sun lights up this side of the mesa in the morning. Here's what it looks like from the other side in the evening. This shot was taken on the main park road just east of 163. These shots were taken at the edge of the parking lot. By the way, several apps can tell you from which direction and when the sun will rise on any day of the year. I use the iPhone app called Helios. To get the shot, you'll have to get here pretty early, and you'll have to try to talk people out of walking into your shot. And that's especially difficult when they don't speak your language. Like at sunrise, at sunset, this is one of the best places to take a picture. You will likely have to take custody of the spot early, and be willing to defend the area in front of you to avoid getting people in your shot. The visitor center patio is a great spot to watch the shadows move across the valley and up the buttes as the sun sinks below the horizon. To get some greenery in your shots of the mittens, drive down to the first pullout. The Three Sisters are backlit in the evening, as is the Thumb. I tend to shoot John Ford's Point in the afternoon and evening. And the man on the horse is much more likely to be there during the high summer season. He makes his living a few dollars at a time, posing, so bring a few dollars with you. I also tend to shoot Artist Point in the afternoon and evening, but you can get great stuff here all day. There are plenty of nice shots away from the pullouts as well. Just look, and you'll find them. There are advantages to hiring a guide for a private photo tour. Until recently, you could negotiate with a private guide. I once got a driver for a half a day for $75. Now you have to go through the official office to hire a guide. The fee is set by the Navajo at about $300 each. If you're with your family, well, this trip could be very expensive. The quote for a pre-sunrise drive for me and 2 others to a high overlook on a mesa was $1,300. For this reason, photo tour group leaders have told me that they're not going to be returning to Monument Valley until this policy changes. But if you want to get close to the totem pole, you'll need a guide. These shots were taken in late afternoon. To get here, we had to drive through deep sand. The guide also took us to this little arch, or window. One of my favorite spots in the valley is only accessible with the aid of a guide. It's called the Teardrop. It takes about 45 minutes to get here. The shot was taken in early afternoon. Monument Valley is a great place for the photographer, and hope this little bit of information can help you take your own masterpiece in the wonderful Monument Valley.